Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grandstand Sports Data, your go to channel for sports, statistics, and unbiased handicapping. In today's video, we are going to answer what betting strategy works best. We're going to go over the fixed strategy, the percentage strategy, martingale, the Fibonacci, and then finally a parlay strategy. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the primary goal of this analysis is to determine which of the five betting strategies is the most effective when applied to sports betting for a period of 28 days. I personally purchased the Touts picks for the 4 weeks to test with a hypothetical $1,000 budget for each of the strategies. So, why is it important to find a reliable strategy? Well, it is reliable to find a strategy for the four reasons down on the bottom left hand side: to maximize your profit, minimize your risk, make sure that your bankroll lasts for a long time, and that it also creates long term success. So, that will be the criteria for the five strategies moving forward. Okay, so for our analysis here, I purchased picks from a sports betting tout over the past 28 days, and here is what we found. Over the course of the 28 days, the tout made 229 picks in total, averaged about 8 per day. Some days were 20, like on the weekend when it was heavy, and then sometimes during the week when the slates were kind of small, maybe there was one hockey game, one basketball game, and only a few MLB games, it would get as low as only two picks. The record over that time was 116 and 113. So it was actually a win percentage of 50.7. If he made all minus 110 bets, he would not be a profitable bettor. He would actually fall below that. As we go forward with the strategies, you will see exactly what he was. In terms of the left hand side and what you will see, this is the breakdown by sport. So you could see the total was 116 and 113, broken down into the five sports that he played. The win rate was 50.7, like we went over, and here are the individual win rates for the respective sport. So, obviously, the number one lesson that we learned just starting out this video without even learning a strategy is that you never buy a tout's picks. We can lose money all by ourselves. I would never buy a tout's picks if it wasn't for this research. I think all touts are scumbags. They all promise a big profit, a big long run of success, and this is what we've had over 28 days was just meh in terms of returns, in terms of win percentage, in terms of record altogether. So for the remainder of this video, we want to see how different betting strategies would work though. We started with $1,000 bankroll for each of the strategies that we will show you. So this setup allows us to directly compare how each strategy performed under identical conditions using the same set of picks. By analyzing these picks, our goal was to find out which strategy would be the most effective in maximizing returns and managing risk. Next, we're going to go over what the five betting strategies are. What's their definition? First, we're going to start with the flat betting theory. This is when you bet the same amount for every single game, no matter what happens. Next would be percentage betting. This is when you bet a fixed percentage of your total money on each game. That's very a layman's way of saying betting a fixed percentage of your bankroll. Martingale is when you double your bet after every loss. Fibonacci is very much like martingale, but you're increasing your bets over a sequence when you lose. So it's a different sequence. It's a more conservative sequence compared to martingale, but very similar to martingale. And then parlays, this is when you combine multiple bets into one big bet. And to win, you need all your individual bets to be correct. All of you guys that play parlays, you already know this. Um, Also, I'd like you to comment down below. I don't think we only had about 229, I believe was the final number of picks. I don't know if that's enough of a sample size for us to get the correct amount. So what I want you guys to do, first I want you guys to subscribe because you're never going to see this content anywhere else. Second, what I want you to do is put a comment down below. What betting strategy did we miss in this presentation that you want to see in the next one? And we're going to run it out to 500 plays. Please put as many betting strategies as you can in the comments below. We will analyze them, we will go over them, and we will try to put them in the next video. One that we missed out here was the Kelly criterion. The reason why we couldn't insert it here is because we did not know what the edge was for our toe. And that's how we couldn't factor into the Kelly criterion formula the math. So he didn't specify what picks he liked better than others. He just gave us the pick with the odds. So going forward, we want to insert that somehow. Also, just like we said, please comment down below on other betting strategies that you may want to take a look into that we can insert into our next presentation. Thank you, guys. Let's move on to the flat betting. And the flat betting, as you can see, what we did was we did a fixed bets at 3% of our bankroll. Remember, our bankroll was $1,000, so it's going to be $30 every single bet. This is the graph showing you how well it's done and how bad it's done. To be honest with you, you're going to see $1,000 starting right here. This would be that $1,000 line. It was over the line a few times. It was under the line a few times. But let's just recap what happened? The record is 116 and 113, like we said, 50.7% win rate. If you're looking at the calculated return financially, that's a minus 1.5% return on your investment. The unit return, so you know how we always go over unit size in terms of Grandstand Sports Data, the unit return was minus 83.53 units. In terms of bankroll, the average bankroll throughout these 28 days was $1,071.14. The max bankroll, so the peak profit was $1,460.28. The minimum was almost close to the last day, but it was actually over here back in early March, or excuse me, early May, sorry to say that, $857.61. The standard deviation, the reason why we put the standard deviation is because this is going to measure what? The risk. Standard deviation is going to measure the risk. Also, the range is going to measure the risk too, but on kind of a lighter note. Next will be the final value. On day 28, what was the value after all the bets were accumulated? Your $1,000 bankroll would have turned into $916.47. So you might not have missed out on much money. Let's move on to the next strategy, however. Is going to be percentage bets. What we did was did 3% of our bankroll measured daily. So at the end of the day, after we won, lost, tied any of our bets, whatever the situation was, we took what that final bankroll number was and we took 3% of it, and that's what our next day's bet number would be. So, for instance, we started with $30. That was a 3% of our bankroll. That's what we played all of our bets on that first day. At the end of it, with whatever the results were, we took 3% of the bankroll, and that was our next day's plays. It was the same record as the fixed amount. The returns were slightly down because remember, you're not investing the same amount of money, so you were down minus 3.1%. And the unit return was down to 13.24. In terms of the average bankroll, it was just slightly over $1,000 when you averaged it throughout. It was $1,003.99. The max it got, so the peak that it got to, was $1,451.65. And then the minimum was $786.76, which was actually the final value of the trial period. The standard deviation is $134.12, and then the range was $664.89. Some people may not understand the standard deviation or the range. We will go over this a little bit more in depth as we go into the final slide of the presentation. So next will be the martingale strategy. And the martingale strategy tells you right here, we started with $30 a day, right? That was our starting bet size, was $30. When you lose with the martingale strategy, what happens is your $30, you need to double your bet. So we did this on a daily basis. I know the martingale strategy works like, say, if you're playing roulette and you put $30 on red, and if you lose, now it becomes $60 and you place that bet. We couldn't do it for individual bets because some games were played at the same time. So it's impossible. So what we did was we did it on a daily basis. What we did was we took the total value at the end of the day. If it was smaller than the amount yesterday, then that means we moved on to $60 per bet for the next day. If we had another losing day, we moved it to 120 the following day, and so on and so forth. You basically double. As you can see, the strategy didn't have much success. It had less games played because when the value of the bankroll got really small, we were only limited to about 2 or 3 plays per day just to stay afloat. So you can see we're 86 and 92 under the martingale strategy. It's a 48.3% win rate. We were down minus 9.5% throughout. Uh, Obviously we're down 100% when you see the final value being $0. We actually lost all our money on the final day. On day 28, we lost everything. The unit return was down 1,000 units. The average bankroll was $1,025.49. The max was $1,946.62. So a very high max, as you can see. So when you're winning, you're really winning. But when you're down, you're really hurting. The minimum was obviously $0, a high standard deviation of $487 with a range that's crazy, $1,946.62. So value ended up being zero. You went through your risk of ruin. Obviously, one of the higher risk strategies out there, losing all of your $1,000 bankroll in just 28 days. Let's move on to the next one now. Would be the Fibonacci. And with the Nachi, this is what we talk about. $30 a day is what we started with, just like the martingale. It's very, very similar to the martingale strategy, as you can see, but a little bit more conservative. Instead of it going 30, 60, 120, we got it just adding to the next one. What we mean by that is when you lose on day one with $30, day two will be $30 again. If you've lost on day two and you move on to day three, it's not going to be doubling your bet. It's going to be adding the two 30s, which equals 60. Now, if you move on to day four from losing, it would be adding 30 and 60 equals 90. That's the Fibonacci. So the next value in the sequence, if you were on a real losing streak, would be 150 because 60 plus 90 is 150. Hope you understand that. From the record, we were 108 and 110 with a 49.5% win rate under this strategy. Remember, the bankroll as it goes down, we were in some of our losing streaks probably around this time right here, and we had to basically lower our bet number. So think of it like this. We only say if we only had $500 remaining and we were at 150 in terms of our bet size, we only have a few bets that we can place. We can't place those 8 bets a day like we were doing. We have to minimize it just so that we don't hit the risk of ruin. Minus 6.4% return on our investment. The unit return was down 566.7. The average bankroll was about $1,124. The max was at $1,626. Minimum was $433.30. That was on the very last day. The Tout, he went on a crazy losing streak to end this simulation of all these strategies. So that you can tell from just the illustrations as you've been seeing. Standard deviation at $235.15. Like I said, I'm not going to go over these much, just towards the end when we're doing our final tally. But this is the Fibonacci system in a snapshot. Parlays. And what we did with parlays is we took the $1,000 budget, we divided it by 28. And that's going to give us $35.71. So we played a parlay every single day with that size of $35.71. We went 1 in 27. So with all the parlays that we played for every single day, one parlay a day with all the picks, we only won once. Like 1 in 27, and it was a 3.6% win percentage. Now they said, hey, but if you're playing a parlay, like you hear this all the time from I guess you would call them square sports bettors. Yeah, dude, if I hit a parlay at this amount of money, I'm gonna be up and above my profit like you wouldn't believe. Wrong. The one parlay that we hit, we still were down 48.8% over the 28 days. Down in terms of unit return, down 487.8. So no, hitting parlays does not save you. And this tout, if he parlayed every single day, only hit once. So not necessarily the best strategy. He averaged the lowest out of all the 5 strategies at $800. His max was at $1,083. His minimum was at $512. Standard deviation and range we will go over on a later slide. The final value was $512.20. Remember, if he didn't hit that parlay in about middle of the illustration, it would have been $0. So he did make some money off of that one parlay. You can see he was hit right here, right at this spot, at this time period right here. Every single time it's been a loser, though, in terms of the parlays. You can see from the illustration, it's just a downward slope unless you hit. But then remember, you're going back to where you were and then even further. So you need to hit at an extreme rate to be actually profitable with parlays, is the translation here. Next will be the comparison. This is when we get a little bit more in depth. As you can see, let's just move on to the flat betting. So that's going to be the blue line. And with flat betting, what you'll hear about the pros and cons. With the pros is that it's very simple, it's very consistent, and it's very low risk. And you can see that from the illustration. The blue line rolls around here. It's basically matching these other strategies until it sets a move on its own with the percentage betting. So in terms of, it's not the highest in terms of reward. So that's one of the cons, is slow growth. That actually checks out. And it's also not necessarily um, great in terms of adjusting confidence. So like if you have picks where you feel more confident than others, you're not going to be able to do that with the fixed betting approach. But it is simple, it is consistent, it is very low risk, and it ended up having us the highest bankroll at the end of the 28-day period. Moving on to percentage betting, that will be in green. Green, I would say, is very much the same as fixed. It has slightly different pros. It's very flexible. It's got good risk management, and it has a more larger potential for growth. I think that if the tout actually won more bets, this green arrow at about this spot right here, the green line would have actually projected further than the blue because of just the winning on a constant basis. And then as you up your bet size while you're winning, that makes you more profitable. So I don't think that the tout actually won enough for us to see that illustration. Some of the cons when it comes to percentage betting is that it's very complex. If you don't want to do the math every single day to figure out your bet size, it can be a headache. Uh, it has very variable risk because it changes consistently every single day, like we said with the bet size. And there's also inconsistent returns, and that might be maybe the reason for this right here and why it didn't jump up is because it didn't have enough wins, and that's the reason for the inconsistent returns. Now moving on to the martingale. The martingale, in theory, you can guarantee profit because you're going to keep doubling down on every single bet. But remember is that if you don't have the theory only works if you have an unlimited bankroll. So you could see at its highest peak, yes, it was doing great. It was doing better than everybody else. But remember, because of these losing streaks that every better has, even a tout, it just goes down and down and down. You dig yourself into this deeper and deeper hole with these losing streaks that you eventually can't come back from. And those are some of the cons as well. It's very, very high risk. It's very high risk. Also, if you have bankroll limits, you just shouldn't even do it. If you have bankroll limitations, it's no way for success to do it. And also the betting limits. The more you keep doubling, the more you're going to make your limit higher. And some, if you have a very high bankroll, some bookmakers will not take that high risk or that high bet size. So that's something to keep in. I have to mention it, even if it's somebody who's working with $1,000 versus someone who's working with $100,000 in terms of a bankroll. Next is the Fibonacci. It's very, very similar to the martingale as we go on. You can see it's just more conservative. So you can see in its losses as well. It's nowhere near the martingale in terms of the graph because of it's very conservative compared to those other strategies. It's very structured. It's less aggressive than the martingale, and it's also good in terms of quick recovery because of the sequence of you increasing your bets and losing streaks. The one thing though is that in terms of cons, it's very complex, it's very high risk, and it has limited flexibility because you're going by that certain sequence. In terms of the parlays, moving on to the fifth strategy, you can see you just weren't doing much in terms of when the tout was actually winning. I would say from about the halfway point looking on to the left, the parlays was doing one of the worst. So it wasn't keeping up with all these wins that they were having. There was some days that the tout was going 4-6, 5-8. So he was being a winning better. But in terms of the parlays and being able to win every single bet, he just wasn't able to do it. He wasn't able to accomplish it. And it also doesn't work well with the parlays. You have to win or nothing. And unfortunately, you only won once, and it was eventually turning into nothing, even though it did a little bit better than the other two in terms of the more aggressive styles, the Fibonacci and the martingale. I still kind of want to argue, just going through this analysis, the Fibonacci is a little bit more of a smarter play than the parlay. Me, I would first two off the list, martingale and the parlay, no question about it. Just from my experience through these 28 days. Now we're going to go over just the basics of what happened and how they finished. So the factors that we went over in the illustrations that I showed you for each of them, I'm going to go over the average bankroll. Well, the best one to have the average bankroll was the Fibonacci, going all the way down the line to the parlay. So when Fibonacci, flat, martingale, percentage, and then parlay. And what I'm going to do to find the final analysis is I'm going to take all these numbers and I'm just going to add them up in the place that they came in. And then the best one is going to be the one with the least amount of points because the least rank is the highest. So as we go on to max bankroll, the martingale obviously had the max bankroll, the highest max bankroll, all the way down to Fibonacci, flat, percentage, and then parlay, obviously. The minimum bankroll was the flat. It ended up being one of the highest, but in terms of its minimum, it had the highest minimum compared to the rest. And then going down the line. Final bankroll, we finished with the flat having the most money, the percentage having the second most money, parlay having the third, and then the Fibonacci and the martingale. Standard deviation. I'd like to say that this measures risk. In the world of finance, they always use this to measure basically volatility. You know, you want small volatility. You want something that's more constant. Well, what were the more constant bankroll strategies? Flat was number one. Number two was percentage. Number three was parlay. Four was the fib. And then five was martingale. Range is very much like standard deviation, but we put it into it's more of a less weight than the standard deviation. Uh, Very much similar. Parlay had the best range, and by range we mean the least. We want the least range, so the least volatility. We don't want the highest. Remember, the martingale was about $1,900 was its range. That's why it's finishing in dead last in that certain category. We're going to go on to rate of return finally, and that's the performance and long-term success that we're looking for. So all of these factors are basically touching on the 4 bullet points that we touched on in the beginning of the slide, which was maximizing our profits, minimizing our risk, being able to keep our bankroll for a long time, and then finally the long-term performance. Rate of return would be the performance. Number one being flat, two percentage, three the fib, four martingale, and then five parlay. So this gave us our final standings of your number one betting strategy being the flat betting system, number two being the percentage, number three being the Fibonacci, four parlay, and five martingale. I would even throw away the parlay and the martingale. I actually doing this analysis actually made me look into the Fibonacci and maybe want to adjust maybe my style when it comes to the Fibonacci. Maybe mix a percentage and Fibonacci system, or even just do almost like an aggregate of the top three and see what you come out with. So there's very much strategies that you can have. As long as it does those 4 key points that I touched on, that's what you'll want from your betting system. But having a betting system, having bankroll management, being able to, you know, be able to bet in the long term and still have that fun, still have that entertainment, and still have the money to continuously bet. That's the goal here in sports betting. You're never going to be able to quit your job. You're never going to be able to live off of just sports betting funds. This is the goal here. Find your strategy, make sure that your money stays with you in the long run, and keep adding to your bankroll with your outside accounts, with your personal money management, and you can still keep that fun and that entertainment of sports betting. Would like to thank you guys for watching. If you wouldn't mind and you like our content, please subscribe down below. We cover much more than just sports betting. We cover NFL, all types of sports, NBA, NHL, we cover everything. Also, if you like these videos and you love the work that we put into them and you want to keep seeing us do, putting in the work that we put in, please hit the like button. This is basically a thank you. It shows the YouTube algorithm that you like our stuff. It also shows us that you like this particular material so that we can keep creating it. Also, sharing it with a friend also helps. And then commenting down below. We mentioned during the illustration, please comment down below on some betting strategies you would like for us to touch on in our next presentation when it comes to this video. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.